Welcome everybody to episode 10 to Divorce Unplugged. I'm Dane Frew and I am joined as always by Geoff Evatt. Geoff, welcome.
Welcome, Dane. Nice to hear from you.
Thank you. It was good to kick off season 2. Again, back with our episode on grey divorce. So another topic to speak on today. We're going to talk about trends in divorce based on the back of the figures recently released by the Australian Bureau of Statistics around separation and marriage in Australia. And there's quite some interesting stats and information in there. So can you kick us off by, first off, just taking us through, I guess, Australia by the numbers and what it all meant?
Yeah, so let's talk about that, because from these big numbers, there's actually some, if you continue to listen, there's some really interesting little trends that are happening which reflect Australian society. So Australia, by the numbers in a practical sense, is that as of March this year, there's just over 27 million people who live in Australia, apart from visitors and people on holidays. And that's a big increase. It's about 600,000 people in 1 year. And since 2020, the population of Australia has actually grown by 1.5 million people.
Really?
Yes.
Big increase, isn't it?
It's a huge increase, and not all of it's natural growth. So most of that growth is actually from people who moved to Australia or immigration. So out of that 600,000 people, about 100,000 were natural births in Australia, and the other 500,000 were people coming from overseas.
Right. How is marriage and divorce trending in Australia?
Well, there's two trends. So let's talk about marriage trends, because that's obviously the positive side of the coin. So last year in Australia, in 2023, there was just over 118,000 marriages, which is a good number, I'll say. Apart from the pandemic year of 2022, when everyone didn't get married the previous 2 years, we had a massive number of 127,000 marriages, which was the most in history.
People playing catch up.
They were playing catch up after a massive 40 or 50,000 drop off the previous 2 years. So we saw a spike, and then we're back. The numbers are still high last year, which was a pleasing trend, I think.
Do you have any an interesting, like, obviously spring in the weddings that I've been to, most weddings are held in spring. Is there a particular month within spring or date even that was the most popular last year to be married in?
Yes, November. So November the 11th in 2023 was the biggest day for marriages.
Right.
And it seems that on a recent article I read that December is the most, the breakup month, I think they're now starting to call it.
Oh, really? Look out. So what about de facto breakups? What do the stats say around that?
Well, de facto breakups are a little harder to measure, because unlike a divorce, we don't have a formal recognition of de facto separations that you can readily identify. But if you look at the Australian sort of trend as to how many married couples there are in Australia, and there was at the 2021 census, there was about 8.7 million married couples, married people, should I say, so just over 4 million couples. If you compare that to the people, 2.1 million Australians who are living officially in a de facto relationship, that's about 1 million couples. So that, if you actually then use the ratios, you could talk about saying, well, in divorce land in Australia, about 50,000 couples get divorced every year. In 2023, it was about 48,700. So if you actually sort of have the same ratios, about 12 to 15,000 couples every year who are de facto relationships probably separate as well.
Yeah. Okay. So we spoke about the marriage, spoke about de facto breakups. You said there was around, 50,000 divorces in 2023. Has that rate increased from previous years, or remained steady, or dropped? Or
overall, it's remained relatively steady. So we had about 50,000 for the last 5 years, except for, strangely enough, 2022, where there was a spike to 56,000 divorces. And we looked as to why that was. And in fact, at your online legal group, we actually did a survey of people of that year as to why they got divorced, and we found there was two reasons. The ABS tell us that the court said there are actually more hearing dates available, but that doesn't quite make sense, because why would all of a sudden would there be an extra 6,000 divorces? It didn't make much sense. So we went and asked everybody, and they basically said two things. Firstly, that yes, there were COVID pressures and people separated, particularly in 2020, which enabled them, which then made divorces higher in the next couple of years, but also that they had more spare time to get all their paperwork sorted out. So that's an unusual one, that a lockdown.
So life admin is preventing people from getting divorced.
It does, and I think I'll touch on that shortly about what is the gap between when people separate and actually file their final paperwork.
So is there anything else that you noticed in the numbers that you can tell us if you delve a little bit further into it?
Absolutely. So what we're seeing is that couples are actually getting married a little bit later. So in Australia, the most recent statistics say that men are about 33 and females are about 31 for their first marriage. But what we're actually seeing is that based on the length of the average relationship before separation, which is about 9 years, that in fact there's been a creep from the average age now where people have separated, where it's crept up to about 42 for men and 40 for women. And then ultimately, when they separate, there's always a gap between separation and actually legally ending their marriage.
You're right. Just out of interest, how old were you when you got married?
I think I was 26, Dave, but that was...
Yeah, right. I was 27. So there you go. Average age is now, what'd you say, 33?
33.
For a male?
It is.
Yeah.
So we were ahead of the curve.
Yeah, we were. So concerning impacts of a delay in getting a formal divorce following separation. You started to touch on this before. What did the figures say there?
Well, the figures firstly say that there's been every year for the last 5 years, when you actually drill down on it, that there's been an extension of time between the date of separation and the date when a formal legal ending of marriage has occurred. So it's actually increased by nearly a year over the last 5 years. So the gap now is about 4 years on average, this is an average of course, between when someone separates and actually their final divorce goes through. So it can be longer or it can be less, but it's a pretty concerning creep.
Have you got a theory behind that creep in numbers?
There's a couple of theories. I think one is economic pressure comes to the front of mind. So people, when they've got other bills to pay, to get divorced actually costs money. So you've got a court filing fee that the government charges. If you're engaging a lawyer, that costs money as well. So on an economic front, it actually is, people are kicking it down the road, so to speak, and getting their formal divorce done.
Yep. So how does a law firm like your online legal group help?
Well, we do help in a couple of ways. One is we provide our service, we think, at a very reasonable cost, and we also can stretch that out with instalments and things to make it more affordable so people can end their marriage. So the other problem people have, of course, is living under the one roof. Now, so we have the situation where people separate, but because of economic circumstances or even lack of housing these days, that people aren't separating in a formal sense. And because they're not separating, it's taking them a lot longer to sort out their financial arrangements. And when they haven't sorted out their financial arrangements, usually they won't get divorced or legally end the marriage until that's happened. So I think that's actually a concerning trend. There's, apart from the fact that economically people can't afford to get divorced, that people are being forced to live together under the one roof.
You've written a couple of really good blogs on that, being separated but living under the one roof prior to divorce. So what we'll do, we'll also link a couple of those blogs into the show notes here, because if people do want some more information on how they can do that, they can read up on the website, on your blog, and have a little bit more of an idea as to how to do it properly to save them a bit of time and money in the long run.
And that's very true, and people shouldn't be precluded from moving on in life just because they are separated under the one roof, and it's important to have that correct knowledge.
All right, the health topic of the day, that basically sums up the divorce, marriage and breakup statistics that the ABS have recently released. What have you got for us today?
Well, I thought we'd go off on a completely different tangent today, and that's when we talk about health topics, we talk about resetting yourself in life after a separation, or just generally your health. I think one of the things that people talk about, and we touched on maybe very early in series 1, was about breathing, and using your breath, or taking the time to use breath as a meditation strategy to improve your general health and feeling of well-being.
So how do we do that? What's the science say behind these techniques? Because knowing you would have delved deeply into it, and you'd understand the reasoning and the why behind it all.
I always go and do some digging, Dane. You do? Yes, indeed. So let's talk about two different techniques and what the science says about them. So There's a very good book called Breath, which looked at breathing through your mouth versus breathing through your nose, and did a deep dive on the benefits of doing one or the other. But the other thing it pointed out was that for a general feeling of wellness and to have a really good balance of carbon dioxide and oxygen, which you need to have in your body to survive, is that your breathing, if you can slow that down to about 5.5 breaths a minute, so about a 10-second breath cycle, so 5 seconds in, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 5 seconds out, nice and slow, and you do that for about a minute, you'll find that it resets your body gases to the optimal level. So that's one way of breathing that'll actually help you reset yourself.
Yeah, and you've mentioned that there was 2 ways. So what was the second technique?
There's another one called box breathing, which it looks at some of the cortisol levels in your body. For example, cortisol is a hormone basically that that rises and falls based on your level of stress. And if you're wanting to fight a tiger, you want to have a nice high cortisol level, but we don't fight tigers in the street very often these days. So
might need more than high cortisol to fight a tiger.
That's probably true, Dave. So let's keep our cortisol nice and low. So box breathing works really well to lower your cortisol level, and it's as simple as a 4-step. I call it a box technique because it's 4 times 4. So basically it's breathing in through your nose for 4 seconds, 1, 2, 3, 4. Then holding that breath for 4 seconds, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then pursing your lips and breathing out through your mouth for 4 seconds. So that noise for 4 seconds is a good noise. And then you stop. You don't breathe back in for another 4 seconds, which sounds a long time, but goes pretty quick if you're counting it in your head. So it's 4 in, 4 hold, 4 out through your mouth, and 4 before you take the next breath in through your nose. And if you do that again for 1 to 2 minutes, which is pretty simple if you're driving in a car or sitting on a bus on the way to work, or even in the afternoon when you're sort of maybe getting that afternoon fade, you'll find that your cortisol levels after a busy morning will drop.
Very good. So it can be done anywhere, anytime.
Exactly. And it won't put you to sleep behind the wheel, so you should be fine on that one. In fact, it'll help flood your body with the good stuff.
Yeah. Very good, very good. All right. Well, if did you want to show us a live demo of any breathing, or
Well, I thought my little summary was pretty good, Dane. So let's leave it at that for the day. But just remember those simple things. 4 times 4. In, hold.
4 in, hold for 4.
4 out through your mouth, making that funny little noise that I made before.
Yep.
And then hold and lock it out for 4 seconds, and then start again. So let's start with that one. If you do that.
That's a nice, easy one to remember.
Easy to remember, and then we can go from there.
All right, very good. All right, well, thanks, Geoff, for the your overview on the ABS stats, and thanks for the health topic of breathing and your advice around that. That wraps us up for episode 10 on Divorce Unplugged, and we hope to see you again next time on episode 11. Thanks
for
joining us.
Thanks, Dane, for having me. Pleasure.
Always. Thanks, guys.